Hello everyone, and welcome to the 19th Annual Caithness International Science Festival and this evening's presentation, Forensic Science, the Real Deal. I'm Claire Gallagher, Science 03 Committee Member, and here with me tonight are Nicola MacLeod, the Festival Coordinator, without whom we would not be here tonight, certainly not on the correct day, definitely not at the right time, along with Ian Bakey, who needs no introduction, he has a Wikipedia page. And most importantly, we have our presenters, Sue Procter and Leisa Nichols Drew. Sue and Leisa are joining us from Think Forensic. Now, Sue is an ex-police officer and Leisa is a forensic scientist, and they're here to unveil how true to life our favourite TV crime dramas really are. So please make the most of the opportunity and ask plenty of questions. On that note, this event is being recorded. However, your screens are not being recorded. So don't worry, there isn't going to be a chat that pops up saying put the red 9 on the black 10. You're okay. On that note, we do have a Q&A section that we're going to be using instead. That should be down at the bottom there. Sue and Leisa are going to answer as many questions as they can.
I think we lost Claire, unfortunately. Can everybody hear me? Is that all right? Yeah. So there's a Q&A at the bottom, and you can use that to ask questions. And Leisa, I think, will be handling with questions with Sue, and I'll come in at the end, very near the end. So if everything's okay, I'll hand off over to Sue and Leisa. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to have you here. And we're really pleased to meet you. I'm Sue. My background, as you've just heard, is that I'm an ex-police officer. I was a police officer in West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire Police for over 30 years. During that time, I did lots and lots of different jobs, but probably the main job that I did was crash investigation. And I did crash investigation for over 17 years. So I would roll up to the scene of a road traffic collision, work out from things like tyre tracks, paint transfer, bulb filaments, exactly what had happened, who was going where, who was at fault, and present the evidence in court. In addition to things like the skid marks and the bulb filaments that we just spoken about, I was also responsible for things like fingerprints and DNA, etc., to determine who the driver was. And when we think about road traffic collisions, we can think a little bit wider, because when we start looking at glass and things like that, then it gets really technical. And glass in vehicles is different in all sorts of areas. So the headlight glass is different to the windscreen glass, which is different to the side windows. So when somebody says, I wasn't driving, we can say, actually, sunshine, yes, you were. We've looked at the tiny fragments of glass on your clothing, and the position of them prove that you were in the driver's seat. So things like glass are very important. Today, you are, I can honestly say, you are really lucky, because you have got one of our star members of staff. Today we've got Leisa with us, Leisa Nichols Drew. She's one of the best scientists I know. Leisa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, thanks, Sue. Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name's Leisa Nichols Drew, and I work with Sue and the team at Think Forensic. So my background is forensic science. So I started in 2000 at the Home Office Forensic Science Service, working in an evidence recovery unit. So based in a forensic lab, we would work on armed robberies, sexual offence investigation, homicide, cold case reviews, terrorism, so a wide spectrum of cases. More recently, I've been working in another lab, and now I work in academia as an associate professor. But also, because of the practitioner experience since 2000, I've started to look at research, and in particular knife crime. So I went a couple of years ago to Australia and Canada to look at how they respond to knife crime, so I could help the UK. And I'm now looking at rounded knives and how we can phase out pointed knives, because they're the most dangerous type of weapon that we encounter. And yeah, so I'm currently doing research also on acid attacks as well, and how we can maximise evidence. So it's a range of roles.
So, as you've already been told, at any point, please feel free to ask any questions you want. We will try our very best to answer them. And if we can't answer them, then Think Forensic has got lots of different members of staff. We've got CSIs, we've got other forensic scientists from other disciplines, in addition to Leisa's discipline. We've got forensic linguistic experts, geographical profilers, lots and lots of different people that work with us. So if we don't know the answer, and between us, we should, because I think we've got about 56 years of experience, something like that between us.
Yeah.
Obviously, 50 of those are Leisa's and 6 are mine. So, okay, so if we just screen share with you for a moment, we're going to show you a crime. It's not a real crime. This is a crime that we set up. And in actual fact, we've cheated because it's one that we've used before. And this is what we actually used when we went to Ireland. We were working with Linda LaPlante. Sorry, we were working with Linda LaPlante. And this is a crime that we used for her murder room. So hopefully you should have my screen up now. These are some of the members of our team. Yes, is it not there?
No, not yet.
Okay, let's have a look, see what's happening.
So while Sue's opening that, one of the things we do is we consult with authors. So we've also engaged with Anne Cleves, who's the author of Vera as well. So we do, we stage their stories for members of the public to come around and have a look. And each of the team at Think Forensic are part of the criminal justice system. Yeah, now we can see it. It's starting to come through.
Yeah. Yes. So these are some of our staff. As you can see, we do have CSIs, but we also have senior investigating officers. And these are people who've spearheaded some quite high profile cases too. So the crime, when it wants to move on, I'm sorry, I've just got a little bit of technical difficulty. Come on, move on, please. Here we go. Yeah. Have a look at this for a second and just have a see what sort of evidence you think that you would be collecting if you were visiting that crime scene. And then we're going to talk you through how we would have a look at it and how we would examine it. What I can do is give you another view. So that's a view from lower down.
So if you want to type any responses in the Q&A, that would be great. We can see what you think. So the first view was an aerial view, and sometimes we do that if we're given the chance to look over a scene. Sometimes we can use drone footage. So any ideas, anyone, as to what types of evidence could be there?
You can see that we've got a body for a start. Somebody's put cause of death. Yeah.
Here we go. Yeah.
We've got blood on the floor, but that might not necessarily be the cause of death. I can see that on the cabinet, we've got a wine glass, we've got a cup, we could be looking at poisoning. So just because we've got the blood, we can't take it for granted that we've got a head wound because it's by the head. We have to deal with everything as though it's just totally no information around it at all. Somebody's put digital data on laptop, possibly. Laptops and zip ties. Zip ties are brilliant, Leisa. The fibers and things that we can get.
So
ties.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So cable ties or zip ties, however you want to call them, they're superb for evidence. So we can have cellular material where the person's gripped them, but also fibers and hairs transfer on them. They're really good for evidence, persistence and recovery. So they're really good. There's some great ideas coming out here. Yeah, we'll look for fingerprints on the window. That's really useful. So which way did the person come in? Have they touched the window coming in the window or coming out of the window? How did they place their hands? That's a really good point there. Yeah, we said that that's really good. Bottles and glasses, the computer. Yeah, so even if people try and delete their information, we can recover that from numerous types of devices. So yeah, the bag on the bed, yeah. So you know, are there personal effects in there? You know, so there could be other objects as well. Absolutely, clothing, hairs, and skin. Yeah, so it's like a plethora of evidence, and we've only shown you a couple of views of that scene. So imagine if you were there at the time. And remember, I don't think anyone said it yet, Sue. No. Oh, someone has there actually. Footprints, or what I would call footwear
marks. Yeah.
Yeah. So often it's those types of evidence as well. Obviously, if this is a suspicious crime, the person had to enter the scene, but also exit. So how did they go about that? Oh, it's really interesting. People are commenting on the ambient temperature of the room. Yeah, so is the heating on, or have they put the aircon on? That can sometimes fluctuate our data, but we have ways around that.
In fact, I can't keep up with the questions here.
No, it's so good. I'm trying. So fingerprints, unusual smells. That's a good one. Yeah. So sometimes some conditions can leave an odor. And there might be unusual type of. So, for example, certain drugs, they could leave an odor, or toxins. So that's really useful. Yeah, so it's brilliant. Yeah, come and join the group.
So what we're going to do is have a look at how we analysed some of this evidence. And probably the first thing, or one of the first things that you mentioned was footwear marks. So when we go to a crime scene, we get marks, or lots of different types of marks. We get impressions in soil and sand and surfaces like that. And with those, we deal with them by taking a cast. And this is a frame that we put around the mark. You can see it adjusts to different sizes. So we use it for footwear marks, tyre tracks, etc. And basically, all we do is we carry some powder in a Ziploc bag. We add water or water in. We mix it to a, if you like, stiff runny paste, pour it in, and when it's set, we end up with something like this. So this is a footwear cast, and this is one a tyre track. And these are great because obviously we can work out a lot from the mark. But also back at the police station, we have a database, and back in the lab, they have a database too. So all manufacturers, whether they be Nike, Hush Puppy, Clarks, whoever, Vans, etc., send us copies of their soles. So we go to a crime scene and we have a look and we say, it's a Nike. And not only that, we go back to the police station and we say, it's a Nike Air Max from 2018. So we know exactly what type of shoe we're looking for. When we get the shoe, obviously we can match it up to the wear pattern. So we all walk differently, and we all put pressure on the soles in different areas, and we can look at those pressure areas and see exactly if that sole matches up to the shoe. And some burglars are not very, very canny, if you like. They will wear the same pair of shoes to multiple burglaries or multiple crimes because they know that they're good, that they're quiet, that they can run in them, that they're comfortable, etc. And shoes are quite expensive, or high-class trainers are quite expensive, so they're reluctant to get rid of them. And it's the same with tyre tracks. So Pirelli, Goodyear, whoever, send us copies of their patterns, and they all go on the database so we can see what type of tyre we've got at the crime scene. And if we're really, really lucky, and it's a relatively new vehicle, then that tyre pattern might be exclusive to a particular make or model of vehicle. And we can do something with the inside of the shoes, Lisa?
Yeah, so if you have a case where you've recovered the shoes, but the person who's been arrested has said that they weren't wearing them, they're not their shoes, then one of the things we can do is take an impression of their foot, and then we can, because how you wear your shoes inside is unique to you. And so what we can do is take an impression of your foot and then place that into the shoe. And we use a famous fairy tale, so Cinderella, we call that a Cinderella fit. So that is an actual examination. And so that's how we can often place that person in the shoe, along with cellular material, DNA recovery. One of the things we can also do is where Sue showed you the pattern on the bottom of that trainer, that cast of the trainer, where we had the zigzags, as you wear that shoe down, those zigzags get thicker and the gaps between them get narrower. So that's what happens over time. So where your foot has pressure with the ground, so the ball of the foot area, the heel, they're really good areas for where what we call wear features. But also if someone's walked over broken glass, that will leave unique scratches on the sole, and that's unique to, that's really rare. So that's a really important feature that we might see at a crime scene, and then we might see that replicated in the footwear. So yeah, shoes can tell us so much information.
Okay, so besides the casts, we obviously get footwear marks that are left in blood, but we get footwear marks just on carpets. We can't see those marks, but we do have a way of lifting them electronically. It's called an ESLA machine.
And so
I can't demonstrate it, unfortunately, because it's too technical to do it in view of the camera. But this is a little ESLA machine. Basically, you have a little PP9 battery in there, turn it on, converts it to high voltage electric current. And then if you've ever gone like that with a balloon and stuck it on the wall, static causes it to stick. Static attracts the dust from the footprint to a layer of foil that we put down beneath this. And what happens is the footwear mark gets lifted in dust in the pattern of the sole. So if we get marks on a carpet, if we get a really serious crime, we might cover the whole of the carpet in the room with this foil and lift the whole of the carpet area. This is not as reliable, obviously, as the cast, and we don't get as good a mark, but we do get a mark that is good enough for the scientist to work with. So that's the ESLA machine. Stands for
the other thing. Sorry, I was just going to say the ESLA is really good, but the evidence is really fragile because literally it's just dust in a pattern. So we have to be so careful how we recover it from the scene to send to the laboratory, because you just have to catch it or put your finger through it and you've lost that pattern. So yeah, it's really fragile evidence.
Okay, shall we, anybody got any questions? Let me just see if there's any questions about footprints. I think, yeah, no, okay. Oh, somebody's asking if rigor mortis is set in. Good question. They're talking about establishing the time of death. We'll come back to that a little bit later if we may. So what we thought we'd do next is show you how we develop fingerprints. And believe it or not, there's over 500 ways of finding fingerprints. And don't worry, we're not going to look at them all tonight, but we thought we might have a look at a couple. So basically, the most common method of developing fingerprints is with aluminium powder. So if you've been unlucky enough to get your house burgled or your car stolen, this is the type of powder that will have been used. And basically what happens is when we touch anything, we leave behind sweat and acid from our fingerprints. The sweat evaporates. So if I take my fingers off there now, you may just have been able to see the fingerprints, but they are slowly evaporating until such point as we won't be able to see them. So we have lots and lots of different powders and lots of different brushes. I'll show you some of them in a moment. But firstly, we'll just use this one. This is a squirrel hairbrush, and all I need is a very minute amount of powder. and you'll see, if I go like that, perhaps it's a little bit like smoke, it's so fine. So basically, all we do is tickle the brush over the tile, and what we get is the fingerprints starting to develop. Yeah. Now, that's brilliant. Yeah, I can take this little tile back to the police station with me, and I can look at it back there and identify the prints. But if this is on somebody's kitchen wall, they're not going to be very pleased if I go taking the tile off, or if it's a door or whatever. So we need a method of getting those back to the police station. And basically, it's simple. This is a fingerprint lifter. This is a small one that we use just for individual fingerprints. It's low tack adhesive, so a bit like sellotape, but not quite as sticky. We find a good fingerprint. I'm going to get a couple there, look. And we smooth it out so that we've no air bubbles in or creases. We peel it off, and when we peel it off nice and smoothly, the fingerprint comes with it. And if I hold that up there, you might just, if I'll put it the right way up, really you might just be able to see it. Yeah. So if I put it on this bit of black card, you'll be able to see it even better. And basically what we do as a crime scene is, Lisa mentioned that somebody may have come through the window. So what we do at a crime scene is we put what we call a gravity mark on. So the gravity mark points down to earth, and that way we know the orientation that the fingerprints were in. And that's very important with things like windows, because if you're climbing through a window and you come in from the inside, then your fingerprints are possibly going to be like that. If you're climbing in from the outside or looking in, then your fingerprints might be like that. So the orientation of fingerprints can prove quite a lot, really. So that's why we put the gravity mark on.
And it's so important when we're talking about weapons. So not to be too graphic, but imagine my bottle here was a weapon. Now, if I'm using it to drink out of, my fingers are here around the bottle. But if I was using it as a weapon, look where my hand is now. My hand is placed around the other part of the weapon. So this is why it's so important we can place where the finger marks are, because that can help us to ascertain what's happened in an investigation. That's one of the things we can do.
So these are some of the other brushes that we use. You may have seen this one on the TV. This is the type that we spin, and the reason we use these is that we can cover vast areas quite quickly. And this is another, this is for the best Royal Doulton, very fragile.
I love those, they're really fluffy.
This one for. So lots and lots of different brushes, but also lots of different powders too. So yes. I've just shown you the silver aluminium powder. And if we had a silver car, then the silver aluminium powder wouldn't be much good, because we wouldn't have any contrast. We wouldn't be able to see the fingerprints. So we can use lots of different colours. And these are some UV powders.
So they glow in the dark.
Yep. Particularly if we've got a dark room or something like that, then we can use the UV powders and a UV light and get them to show up. So anybody got any questions so far? Yeah, if fingerprints evaporate over
I'll look at them.
How long do they last? Well, that's a really good question, because it depends on several factors. It depends on how good the mark was originally. It depends on the environment, so the surface that they've been left on, but also the conditions, whether it's damp, humid, dry, warm, etc. The warmer we are, the more fingerprint we leave behind. So lots and lots of different factors. And I can tell you that one of our CSIs went to a crime scene once, and it wasn't the cleanest house in the world, as you can imagine. And what he did was he fingerprinted the door. And as he fingerprinted the door, he started at the top of the door and he worked down. And at the top of the door, there were some large fingerprints. Further down the door, the fingerprints were getting smaller. When they got down to the bottom of the door, the fingerprints were very small, but the fingerprints were all the same pattern. So obviously this was a child that had grown up into an adult, and those fingerprints were still there. The door had never been cleaned, so as I say, it wasn't the cleanest house in the world, but we just can't tell you how long fingerprints will last, because it just depends. You've done some research, Leisa, on fingerprints in water, haven't you?
Yeah, so it's unbelievable. You know, if you were to, in the burial environment, the water environment, we can still recover finger marks. We just have to find the method that will do it. So Sue mentioned being hundreds of methods. The Home Office of the UK have a manual, and it has all of the methods. So we've demonstrated one powder method there, but in that manual, there's every combination. So if you've got a carrier bag and the carrier bag was wet, then there'll be a method for that. If the carrier bag was dry, there'll be another method. The new polymer banknotes that we have, we've never encountered those before. We're the first country in the world to have that particular polymer plastic banknote. It's different to other polymer banknotes in Vietnam, New Zealand, Canada. So we needed to invent new methods for those polymer banknotes. So it's unbelievable, but there are certain things that we're all the time learning about. So yeah, so it's really exciting.
I'll just show you this other method, because this is quite interesting. This is paper. So the surface that I've just used the aluminium powder on is a smooth, non-porous surface. Paper is porous. If we use the aluminium powder on it, it won't work too well. So basically, we can use a magnetic powder, and this is what we call a magnetic wand. We put the magnetic wand, let me just move this back off my laptop, I don't want it all over it. We put the magnetic wand, oops, glad I moved it back, in the magnetic powder, and then we can just tickle the powder on the paper, and I will show you this in a minute. This is the same paper as I've just shown you. I can promise you that the fingerprints are starting to develop.
I love this method. I call it a magic wand because it happens like magic.
Yeah, and after we finish, this is a very clean process, because we can just go around, pick up the powder and pop it back in the pot. So I'll just get that bit off my laptop before I go any further. And there you go. There's the, can you see that? There's the fingerprints.
Yeah, they're really good.
That we couldn't see before. So, so that's the magnetic powder, and that comes in lots of different colours too. And lastly, shall we tell them about the fuming? Yeah.
Yes. So there's lots of methods. So you know, we've talked about 2 powder methods there, but this is one of our favourites as well. So imagine you've got the handle of a knife. It's all bumpy and textured, so the plastic handle of a knife, or maybe the inside of someone's car, or a gun, or maybe a foil drug wrap. So one of the methods we can do, because those surfaces are quite textured, they're not smooth, we can use super glue, just conventional super glue. And what we do, we put some drops of the super glue in a little pot. You could do this at home, but just make sure it's not your best bowl you're doing it in. If not, don't blame. But it's quite a good method. So you're going to put some glue in a little pot, and then you're going to put some hot water in the other pot. And as the heat from the water vapor rises and it becomes humid in this chamber, what happens is the residue that's left from the finger marks, the glue vapor adheres to the finger marks. So what you're left with are all these finger marks on your textured surfaces. And it's brilliant. And now we've even got some that fluoresce in the dark. So I'm just excited about the things fluorescing. Yeah, so it is a fantastic method for textured surfaces. So really, really good. It's a really easy method to do. It's really effective, and the detail that you obtain from those is unbelievable. So it's really useful.
Yeah. So as you can see, this
and you can do cars.
Yeah, sorry, this foil here has got lots and lots of fingerprints on it that we've developed. I hope you can see those, and we've just highlighted them with a UV light. But that's just the glue that's stuck to the acids that we've left behind. You were going to say about cars, Leisa?
Yeah. Oh yeah, so you can fume a car. If you had a tent, you wouldn't want to be in the tent when you were fuming, because obviously the fumes from the glue can be quite toxic. But you can fume a car. The only thing is you wouldn't want the car back at the end of it, because you can imagine how many surfaces you touch of a vehicle. It would be covered in glue, so it would probably ruin the car. But in major crime incidents, that could be something that we'd have to do. So it is quite possible, because sometimes we get asked, would you fume a car? Yes, we would.
Someone's asked if someone's hands are burnt, can we get fingerprints? Yeah, your fingerprints are really, really resilient. What happens is the fingerprints that you are born with are the fingerprints that you die with. Your pattern doesn't change. Just as you get older, your fingerprints grow bigger. If you cut yourself and don't cut yourself badly, your fingerprints grow back in exactly the same pattern that they were before. If you cut yourself badly, then you will end up with a scar that becomes part of your fingerprint pattern. So yes, you can burn your fingerprints off and you'll end up with scarring. You can sandpaper your fingerprints off, and you can sandpaper right down to get rid of the ridges and furrows, and it'll be really painful. But after you've finished, all that will happen is that your fingerprints will start and grow back. So people who work in certain professions, particularly people, bricklayers, because they're handling rough bricks. There aren't many in this country, but we get people who work in pineapple factories. Because of the rough texture and the acids in the fruit, it erodes their fingerprints. But as soon as they stop working in those occupations, their fingerprints grow back again into exactly the same pattern. And fingerprints, they develop before we're born. So they develop whilst we're in the womb, and prior to having fingerprints, what we have are little buds on the end of our fingers, and those little buds are what develops into the fingerprint area. And whilst we're in the womb, there are lots of amniotic fluids that are flowing around over the fingers that cause this ridge detail. So it's a little bit like going to the seaside. You see the beach where the tide has come in and gone out, and it leaves all the ripples on the beach. That's what's happened to your fingerprints. And I see that a little while ago, somebody asked if I'd ever caught anybody because of a footprint they put. Footprint is different to a shoe mark. A footprint is a barefoot, and I did catch a burglar because of a footprint. He actually thought it'd be really clever, take his shoe off and commit the crime. What he didn't realise was that he got a hole in his sock, and he left a really nice copy of his planar print, which was a copy of the print on his big toe. I can tell you it wasn't very pleasant taking the impression of his toe print, but he did get caught and convicted because of that. So yes, we can do people because of their footprint. A footwear mark, a shoe print, I do know of cases where people have been convicted because of a footwear mark. We had a very nasty assault when I was a police officer. It was an old person that was assaulted. They were beaten up, there was a bit of a struggle, and a vase got broken. The footwear mark was on the inside of the broken vase. So the only explanation for that was that the offender had stood on the vase after it had fallen onto the floor during the struggle. Could be no other explanation. So it was hard and fast evidence from just one footwear mark. Somebody's put, I am not sure if this is true, but there is a genetic condition where people don't have fingerprints. Yes, there absolutely is. We know of a couple of families. One is I think it's in South America. The whole family do not have fingerprints. We're not really sure why this has happened. It is very, very rare. But yes, there is a genetic condition where people don't have fingerprints. Also, I said about occupations eroding fingerprints. Drugs do too. So particular drugs for chemotherapy, because they work on a cellular basis, they do get rid of fingerprints. people have been refused entry to the USA when they've tried to give the fingerprints when they've been treated for cancers because of the drugs. But the minute they stop using the drugs, the fingerprints come back. So I hope that's explained that. How do we get... Oh, you're back, Leisa. Yes. Hello.
Oh, I was here, Sue. I was here all the time. The genetic condition, for the person that asked about that, it's called a dermatoglyphia. It's where your skin is just completely smooth. So as Sue said, we know about a family in America, but there's a family in Europe as well. Yeah, they've just inherited a gene they've got this condition. So they're two families that we know of. So completely smooth. So no friction ridge skin, what we call it.
Somebody said, how do we get a footprint from a carpeted room? That would be the ESLA that we've just shown you, that we would use for that. We've got that one. Does a dustier crime scene help? Yes and no, because we're actually lifting the powder. We're not lifting, with fingerprints, we're not lifting the mark. If I was to wipe this, if I was to lift this fingerprint totally off this tile that I developed earlier, and I was to go like that again with some more powder, the fingerprint would develop again. The fingerprint is still there. It's just the powder that we're actually lifting in the shape of the pattern. What happens? Yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry. So what happens if the results of your fingerprints aren't on the system or have never been recorded, they get loaded to the database and that's where they'll stay. But we'll also search to see if there've been similar crimes where those fingerprints may have been found. So that's how we can link scenes. So burglary scenes, even sexual assaults, there could be, if we haven't got the person, we'll load them to the database and that's where they'll stay until we have a person in custody or, someone's arrested.
Yeah, so if I just share my screen again. So there are three main types of fingerprint. There's whorl, loop and arch. There are other types and they are basically amalgamations or interpretations of these three basic patterns. So we get something called a double loop, which loops up and back round. We get a tented arch, which is more of a point, and lots and lots of different. We get a composite, which is a mixture of more than one of them. So lots of different ones, but these are the three main basic patterns. And if I put this next picture up, you can see that we've got a left loop and a right loop, and believe it or not, that tells us which hand we're looking at. And the experts can look at an arch or look at a whorl, and they can look at the side of the pattern. We call that area a delta, and they can work out by looking at the delta again which hand they're looking at, whether it's left or right. So that's how we classify the fingerprints into whorls, loops and arches. But when we want to identify the fingerprint belonging to someone, we have to take it a step further and we have to go to this. This is the characteristics or the minutiae of the fingerprint. And you can see that at the top right, we've got something called a dot. That's very cunning of the experts to call it that. We've got a bifurcation on the left-hand side, fancy word for where one line splits into two. So all these little marks are little patterns within your ridge patterns of your fingerprint. You can see the delta there, look, on the bottom left that I just spoke about. That's at the edge of the fingerprint. So the experts look for these points and look to see where they are and to see if they match up with the mark from the crime scene with the criminal. And when we, if we look at this, this is just a very small part of a fingerprint. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but there we've got the dot. Here we've got an island, we've got a bifurcation, we've got a little spur coming off, another bifurcation there and there. So lots and lots of different points within just a very small part of a fingerprint. So we don't have to have a whole fingerprint at a crime scene to be able to match it up. Sometimes it's enough with just a little fragment of that fingerprint. So what happens is, once we've got this and the experts have matched it up, it'll end up looking something a little bit like this. So all these arrows are going to different points on the fingerprint, whether it be a dot or an island or a bifurcation or whatever. And it takes 3 experts to agree that that fingerprint belongs to that person before it can actually go to court. They have to study fingerprints for 5 years before they're considered expert enough to give evidence. So unfortunately, they don't get out much. But it's a job where they are constantly having regular breaks, because you can imagine the strain on people's eyes when they're trying to match up those little points. So the initial sifting of the fingerprint is done by computer. And then the computer will present us with certain fingerprints that it thinks are possibilities. And then they will be handed over to the experts to have a look at, and they're handed over anonymously. So there is no identification to the fingerprint. They have no idea whose it is and no idea who they're dealing with. So that's how we identify fingerprints. We've got a question from Daniela. If someone's hands are wet, can we take their fingerprints? Well, when we take a criminal's fingerprints, we take it on, and just stop sharing. We take it on a squared, that's not showing up very well, but a squared sheet. Each of those, we put a fingerprint in. And what we actually do with the criminal, if I was to say to you, I want you to put your fingerprint on that paper, what you do is possibly do something like that for me. You give me a nice round mark. And in actual fact, our fingerprint actually goes from right round there, right round there. So when we take a criminal's fingerprints, we actually roll them. So what we end up with, and that's not very good because I've just done that on my hand, we wouldn't have that in it. But we've ended up with a big fat fingerprint as opposed to this little mark. And the reason we do that is if we just get a partial print, it might just be the side of the fingerprint, and that's why we need the whole of that area. So we used to do it in ink. More often now it's done electronically. However, there are still some stations in the sticks, or if technology drops out, then we still have to use the old inking method. And this ink that I've got here is a vast improvement on what we used to have, because when you used to get your fingerprints taken, it wouldn't come off for days. So when somebody had been arrested, then as police officers, we always knew for about 3 days that they'd been arrested. So they were a bit of a giveaway. And whenever we arrest anybody, we take copies of their fingerprints. If I arrested someone at 10 o'clock in the morning, I'd take copies of the fingerprints. If they were released on bail and they committed an offence again at 11 o'clock and they arrested them again, I would have to take their fingerprints again. And the reason behind that is when a case goes to court, we're not allowed to reveal that somebody has been in trouble before. If we say that we'd already got their fingerprints on file, then we're revealing that they've been in trouble before. So we have to do them on each occasion, regardless of how recent it was. And if somebody's not convicted in court, then in England, in any case, and I can't speak about Scotland, but in England, their fingerprints get destroyed and removed from the database. What if someone has prosthetic arms? What evidence in a crime scene could they leave behind if there aren't fingerprints? Well, let's just try an experiment. Obviously, they're not going to leave fingerprints, but we do have lots and lots of other evidence. We've got things like fibres and hairs, but also what we get very often at crime scenes is people are listening at windows to see if there's anyone in. I don't know if this will work or not. I'm going to try and develop an ear print with magnetic powder. So I just put the paper on me. It might work, it might not. It's a little bit cold in here this evening, so my ear isn't very warm. Just going to tickle it over the paper now and see if anything develops. Okay, and just get rid of the powder. Well, we have a little bit of an ear print. Don't know if you can see that there. Yeah. They're doing a lot of research into ear prints, lip prints, nose prints, etc., to see if they're as unique as our fingerprints. Oh, good question there. Really good question. How many points of similarity are required for a fingerprint?
Well,
yeah.
prior to 2001, in the UK criminal justice system, you needed 16 areas of similarity between the finger mark at the scene and the fingerprint from the person. But after June 2001, there is no numerical standard in England and Wales. So that's why you need the independent opinions from experts in that subject area. So that's what we recommend now, because because if you set a number, you might have some prints might be barely visible, some might be in blood, as Sue said. So to give it a number value is quite difficult. So now, and there's been quite a few cases you might have heard of. One is included Shirley Mackay case in Scotland. So now we take the independent, and it's really important, as Sue said, to reduce the prospect of bias, we have the independent opinion from different expert witnesses to give the finger mark evidence. So potentially you could go to court and there might be, I don't know, too minutiae, but does that mean that that's lower evidence than a poor quality mark where you might have potentially more? No, it's based on the opinion of those independent people. So if I looked at a finger mark and I made my judgment, Sue wouldn't know what my judgment was. And if our colleague Gary looked at it, he wouldn't know what either of us decided. And so it's completely independent. And that's really good that we have that now.
Somebody says, what sort of ink do we use? This is the one that I've just used is an emollient ink. That's what they're using at the moment. But as I say, most of it is done digitally now. What happens if someone refuses to give fingerprints? How do you obtain them? With force?
Yeah, you have to roll their finger.
Yes, I've seen people being rolled so that we can get a rolled impression of their finger. So like cartwheeled so that we can get an impression of their finger. We have every right to take fingerprints.
Yeah, so that's a really good question about the Mayfield case. If you look at the finger marks in that case, so that's the Madrid bombing case. If you have a look at where that finger mark was, it was quite a poor quality mark. I think it was on a carrier bag found nearby, if I recall. And it is a very, very poor quality mark. So what we need to establish is, it's not, the finger mark Sue showed you where we matched it up in red. In reality, finger marks are not like that. Sometimes in casework, they're really, really poor quality. And so sometimes we just it's inconclusive. And unfortunately, the Brandon Mayfield case, his finger mark was identified, but on subsequent examinations by other examiners, it was found to actually another individual had deposited it. So it wasn't the fact that those two people had the same fingerprint, it was the surface. If you were to look at the diagram of the finger mark, it's very, very poor quality. And that was the failing in that particular case, because they attributed so many numbered areas to Brandon Mayfield. So so in my opinion, finger marks, and I think it's still true today, finger marks in the UK go to court more often than DNA evidence. So it's more individualised for finger mark evidence than DNA.
Yeah. And obviously we use fingerprint evidence more because it's cheaper. We don't have to have it analysed as such in a lab. So it's cheaper to lift and develop, etc. Have you ever had the same criminal's fingerprints not match each other? We get fingerprints that we can't match all the time, either because somebody isn't on the database or because the quality isn't good enough. I mean, these fingerprints that I've done are sort of under good conditions. I've put my hand on the paper. We don't get criminals going along and saying, I'll leave a fingerprint on this glass. What we end up with are just smudges very often, and that's where the partial print comes in. Fingerprints are great, not just for identifying people, but for also matching crime scenes up to crime scenes, so we can find out if the same criminal has visited several different scenes. And one of the things that very often happens on the TV is that the CSIs are always fingerprinting the light switch or the door handle or something like that, and they're like high traffic areas. Everybody touches the door handle, everybody touches the light switch, so what we get are fingerprints on top of fingerprints. And until recently, they were just a mess. Now we can separate them, but until recently we couldn't. However, it's not 100% reliable, and if we get a really, really serious crime, we can try a method using gold called gold metal deposition. We can use that on light switches to try and get a result, but generally speaking, you won't get the CSI coming around to your house and fingerprinting your doorknob or your light switch if you get burgled, just because of the high traffic. Do gloves prevent fingerprints being transferred onto surfaces? Yes and no. At crime scenes, we always double or triple glove, so we wear 2 or 3 pairs of gloves on top of each other. That's because fingerprints can come through gloves. We can get fingerprints from the inside of gloves. So very often in summer, burglars don't like to be caught with fingerprints in the pocket at night time, because it just means one thing. So they'll ditch them quite close to the crime scene. And if we find them, we can match the fingerprints on the inside of the gloves up to the gloves and up to the criminal, but then we can match the glove marks up to the crime scene, because glove marks leave an impression at the crime scene, which we develop very similar to how we develop fingerprints. So we do actually lift glove marks, and we have got a database of glove marks. And gloves are great as well, because very often if burglars have got their hands full, they take gloves off like this, and that gives us some really nice DNA, or some nice DNA inside, or from the fingers when they're peeling it off. So gloves are not the be all and end all for burglars. All right, somebody wants a career change. Leisa, you deal with that.
Yeah, so so in the UK, depending what you're doing right now, if you're at college, you can do A levels or a BTEC, and then you can go to uni. We can do an access course if you want to go and retrain. Then you can go to uni and study forensic science. I always say that people should look at the Chartered Society of Forensic Sciences, because they accredit degree courses in the UK. And we're accredited at the uni I'm at in De Montfort in Leicester, and we're accredited for crime scene, lab analysis, and the court. So there's different areas. So yeah, it's a fantastic career. So yeah, and we need the next generation. So we want to pass the baton on. So yeah, please. And there's a forensic science for everybody. So if you're not a fan of what I look at, so body fluids and blood stains, then there'll be a forensic evidence for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, down to plants and geographical things, environmental evidence, lots and lots of different branches of forensic science. What if they wear gloves? I think we answered that.
Yeah. This is a good question, Sue.
Oh, a burnt house.
About the burnt house.
Excellent.
Yeah. So so this is a really good question, because in a fire, what happens is obviously you've got the smoke, but you've also got the soot. And a lot of people think that fires remove the evidence. And what I always say is the fire just changes the state of something. So for example, my plastic bottle will become molten. If that were to melt onto my paper notebook here, what would happen is the other pages in the notebook would still be, they might have soot around the edges. Would they show my finger marks inside? Yes, potentially my finger marks would still be present. So what happens is in a fire, things are layered on top of each other. So potentially, and we have had cases where we can remove the layer of soot, and then we can find blood, finger marks in blood under the soot. So what we do, we get this layer of gel, like clear jelly, we put it down on the soot, that lifts the layer of soot, and there underneath is all the blood. So yeah, so it's just about finding it. You know, we'll go to the nth degree to find the evidence if it's there.
Yeah. People think that fire burns everything, and it does.
Yeah.
We still get evidence there, but it's not just what we leave behind. It's what we take away as well. And there was a case in Ireland where the IRA were very, well, when they were very prolific, and they did a murder. And basically they stole a car, but they put on overalls and everything. So they stole the car, they took it to somewhere quiet, they put on overalls, balaclava, gloves, everything. They drove the car to the victim's house, they got out of the car, they went down the drive, they shot the victim dead without ever saying anything. They went back, got in the car, took the car to somewhere quiet, took all the stuff off, threw it in the car, threw the gun in the car, set fire to the car, and the whole lot was completely gutted. But the owner of the stolen car, the proper owner, had got a dog, and dog hairs had got transferred into the vehicle. The dog had never been in the vehicle, but dog hairs had got transferred on the owner of the car's clothing into the vehicle. Just a few. They were on the driver's seat, they were on the passenger seat, and the IRA murderers picked up the dog hairs on the clothing. They did all this, put all the clothing on, etc., to commit the crime, and then they went home and hung their original trousers in the wardrobe with the dog hairs on. So it's not just what we leave behind, it's what we take away as well, and we call it Locard's principle, and that's what forensic science is based on. Edmond Locard was a French scientist, and he said every contact leaves a trace. So basically, everything we come into contact with, we leave a trace of us behind, and we take a trace of that away, and we deposit it somewhere else. And that's what basic forensic science is based on.
And animal hairs are so useful because, you know, like Sue said, we've all got pets at home. You don't realise that, you know, if you go and sit on the bus, you're transferring your hairs from your clothing to the bus. You might sit next to someone, they're wearing a yellow jumper, you get yellow fibres on you, and you take them away with you. So it really is, it's a minefield of evidence that we're surrounded by.
That's a picture of lots of different animal hairs under the microscope. If you get the chance to look at rabbit hair, not that we get many rabbits involved in crime, but if you get the chance to look at rabbit hair under a microscope, have a look. It's really, really pretty. And so is cat too, but you can see all the differences in them. And hair is in three parts. We look at all three parts of hair when we're analysing it. So the outer part is the bit that contains all the overlapping scales, the cuticle. The next bit is the cortex. That's the bit that contains all the colour. If you look at Lisa, she's got colour in hers. I haven't got any colour in mine, unfortunately, nowadays. And then we've got the middle bit. And if you look at the top right one, the human one there, that's looking at the central channel in the middle. That's called the medulla or medulla, however you want to say it. And that channel can be constant or missing or broken. So we look at all those three elements when we're identifying the type of hair, right down to different types of human hair as well, because all the different ethnic backgrounds are different too.
And also, we mentioned about a fire. You know, we can tell if hair's been burnt, if it's been pulled. So in a fight, two people are having a fight, if hair's pulled out, the ends of the hair look like hooked umbrella handles because it's been pulled out with force. So that, you know, hair is brilliant evidence.
We're getting quite a few inquiries about what subjects you need to take in school, etc. Science, either one science or as many sciences as you can. Maths, if you can do anything extra like photography and things like that, then great. So you need to be aiming at those. English too, if you can, because obviously we've got report writing, etc. to do. But if anybody does want any specific careers advice, or if you've got any authors there that wants any tips and hints, Nicola, they can by all means get in touch with us, drop us an email, and we'll do our best to answer you. Yeah. How useful are facial recognition? Very useful. CCTV images, yes, some of them are very hazy or very blurred, but that is getting better and better. And there is more CCTV footage around than ever there was. And it is, as I say, getting better. Even things like Ring doorbells that are overlooking streets.
And dash cams,
yeah.
so people's dashboard cameras. And it all depends on the frames per second. So, and they, as Sue said, they are getting more sensitive now. And that's also very useful when we're looking at how someone walks. We call that gait analysis. So if the expert needed to look at someone's walking, you'd need a very good quality CCTV. So we look at frames per second. So it's not like a robot motion. You want it to be natural. Yeah, so it is getting better.
Yeah, somebody wants to know if you're going to commit a crime. I don't think there is anything such as a perfect crime.
No, I don't, Sue.
When I was a young PC, I can promise you, it's so long ago that we'd never heard of DNA. And when DNA did become more popular, you had to have a sample of blood or whatever, at least the size of a 50p piece. Nowadays, we can't see the size of samples, and we're getting more and more cold cases that are getting solved because science has progressed. So forensic science in particular is progressing at such a fast rate that there is no such thing as a criminal that's not going to be caught. Eventually, criminals will get caught because science will overtake it. We don't throw evidence away. We go to a crime scene, we gather all the evidence and we keep it. And we've got big warehouses all through the country where it's stored at the right temperature, right humidity, etc., to preserve it until such time as we can use it. And when I was a young PC, I dealt with some rapes and they were solved 15 years later. So, as I say, we don't throw evidence away. There's no such thing as a perfect crime, only a criminal that hasn't been caught yet. We're just waiting to get them. Could we, well, I think we've answered that. Like a TV series, Dexter. Dexter is one of the few things that I do watch. I do like it. It is far-fetched though, isn't it? But his blood spatter analysis is excellent. We do it exactly how they show it. In fact, this is Boris. Yeah, he's our blood spatter head. Here in Huddersfield, we've got a crime scene centre, we've got a blood spatter room. We take Boris down, poor lad gets a good bashing, and he never gets any pay for it either. He's our cheapest member of staff. The brown bit on top of Boris is wax. We put a new wax top on each time, fill it full of blood, and then away we go with whatever weapon we want to use to recreate a crime scene.
This is a good question, Sue. Can I answer this one? Is there any way of conducting a crime scene atmosphere analysis? There is. There's a new analysis called MALDI, and it's a form of analytical equipment, so we can even analyse within a finger mark if someone's a smoker or what you've eaten, if you've had any sort of medicine. So yeah, and also at crime scenes where we have bodies, you can also have volatile organic compounds. They're the odours that are given off after death. So definitely we analyse lots of different molecules, and it's really important because you know, molecules change in your different body fluids, for example. So urine, that's how often our drug detector dogs can detect those molecules and aromas. That's why we use them, you know, very often in crime scene investigation.
Can I answer this one? Do I feel there's discrimination against women in forensic science? I became a police officer before equality, so I've experienced lots and lots of different things, but I can tell you that perhaps within the police service, Supervisory officers are underrepresented with women, but in forensic science, there are more women than men. So we've got more female CSIs, we've got more female forensic scientists. So ladies, the world is now your oyster. Yeah, go out and get it.
Yeah, there's no, you know, nothing should hold you back. Yeah, I agree, Sue.
Yeah. Could we track a stolen or burnt car from cat and dog paw prints? Not quite sure what you mean by that, but cat and dog paw prints, we do casts of them. We sell kits. We actually sell a paw print kit.
Yeah, so you can track wildlife crime from animals' paw prints. So if someone's trailing an endangered species, but we wouldn't do that in this country, no, because cats wander all over, don't they? And so do dogs. So you know, they're not discriminatory. But definitely wildlife crime, where with illegal trafficking of animals, then it might be that where we're tracking poachers who are tracking the animal paw prints, then yes, you would. But no, I don't think, definitely. I would say no to that question.
I think as regards police dogs, they're absolutely brilliant. We can train a dog to sniff out anything, so it's not just within the police service, prison service, HM forces, lots and lots of different things dogs are used for. So we use them for sniffing out accelerants at fire scenes, we use them for sniffing out criminals, cadaver dogs for sniffing out bodies, blood dogs for sniffing out the smallest speck of blood. They sniff out SIM cards and money. You can train a dog to sniff out anything. The fire dogs are brilliant. They wear little booties to prevent the feet from getting cut in the fire scenes. And we had here we run the CSI experience for members of the public, so members of the public can come along and do that. And we had somebody on the CSI experience one day. They'd got their own dogs and they'd trained them to sniff out bed bugs, and they'd managed to launch a company sniffing out bed bugs in hotels. So if anybody's into dogs and cats, there you go, a career there for you. We've done that one.
So hundreds of cases. I've done hundreds of cases. Do we do unsolved cases? Yes, we do cold case reviews. I wouldn't be able to give you an exact number, but yeah, lots of cases, different cases.
Yeah, and I'm the same. I've lost track of how many cases I've dealt with. How often is facial reconstruction done? It's done quite often, really. If you get decomposed bodies, so we reconstruct, or we don't, the specialists reconstruct faces, the anthropologists and artists reconstruct faces in clay, and also we get artists that draw faces, and then there's the CompuFit. So it's a specialist job doing the computerized faces. It's not just operating the software, etc. It's also interviewing people. And it is a very specialist job because you've got to have a lot of patience. You might have a victim that's severely traumatized, and it can take weeks or months to get a description out of them and get a picture together. So it is a very highly skilled job.
Sue and Lisa, can I just interrupt here? We've had loads of questions, and I was going to invite any of the audience, if they wanted to leave some feedback, what they thought of the presentation, or any comments they'd like to leave, I'd like them to do that at this time. Would you like to take maybe one more question and then we'll wrap up?
Yeah, it is said that, oh, where's that gone? It's just gone. Is the police the only route into forensics? No, university is the main route into forensics. But when you're going for a university course, Lisa, you would say look for one that's
accredited.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the Charter Society. I'm typing it in here into your question, so that you can look on their website and then you can find courses that suit what you're looking for. They accredit, oh, it keeps moving, sorry. There we go. If you look at their website, they accredit courses.
Thanks very much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Some of the feedback we're getting, Fiona is saying really informative. Thank you. Another Fiona, very interesting talk. Learned loads. Thanks, ladies. Neil, this has been an informative presentation. Thanks for participating in Science 03. So really feedback coming through there, really strong feedback. Ladies, you were working like a Formula One team, replacing the tires on a car. I thought there were nearly 60, nearly 90 questions in under 90 minutes. So you were doing really well handling that quickly, because they're coming thick and fast, and you made it so very interesting too. So I'm glad. Oh, I've got a comment here from Ellie. Ellie's a level 3 BTEC student, found it a great webinar. Thank you for your time. Carly said it's been great. Hannah Gunn enjoyed the presentation, very informative. Talid said, thanks for the talk, interesting. It was Jessica said it's fun, interactive presentation, and let's see if there's any other. I think they're all ones that you've dealt with. Anyway, that's good. So ladies, I was going to thank you so much for your presentation, and indeed the audience, and I was going to then introduce some other talks. So if you'll just bear with me for a second. Tomorrow night, Thursday the 18th, I think at 7 o'clock, Dr. Michael Leach. He's the author and wildlife photographer. He's joining us to explore animal intelligence that reveals it's not just humans who are tempted to tell untruths. Ladies, you'll like this description. Animals behave badly. We'll meet drunken monkeys, psychotic magpies, spaced out lemurs, and smooth talking cornbirds. Have you come across that in your forensics?
Well, some similar type of people.
And on the starting on Friday the 19th of March for 3 consecutive nights, we're set to explore a guided tour of the moon from members of Caithness Astronomy Group, who are great friends to the Science Festival. These short sessions will explore our celestial neighbour, the moon, and include streamed observations, weather permitting. And on Saturday the 20th, Dr. Leach joins us again. Ladies, locally, Dr. Leach is known as Gorilla Man, because he's been in all our schools and shows how to communicate gorilla. So during this second talk, he's going to be talking about the endangered mountain gorillas of the African cloud forest, drawing on his own experiences of living with these incredible animals. He'll teach you how to get close to gorillas in the wild and gain an understanding of what it means to be an endangered species. And you'll be able to communicate gorilla after the talk. All our details are available online on science03.org. And I think I'd like to thank Think Forensic, Sue and Leisa, for a most amazing talk. The most questions we've ever had. I think you've set the world record, and a very high one. And it was a terrific interactive talk, ladies. And if I could also then thank Claire and Nicola. Claire had some problems at the beginning, I think, with the communication, and Nicola for doing it. So thanks, everybody. If we can say bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.